So what's a good velocity to be lifting at? This is probably the most common question I get asked when it comes to training with VBT. And it's not that clear cut. The aim of training is to get better, right? We want to improve and make progress each session. So just like with our strength, we want to add weight to that barbell, you want to do the same with your lifting velocities. I think this is the most valuable application of velocity in your training. And it's the idea of using context or your recent history and feedback as a way of answering that question. What's a good velocity? Well, it's all about lifting slightly faster today than you have in the past. Let's say you're learning or you're teaching a new movement, maybe the Olympic lifts. We're breaking down that complex movement into simpler components so that we can then build it back up afterwards. Coaching for something like this will start internally. Maybe sit back into your hips, load your hamstrings, get your thumbs under for the hook grip. As you advance, these cues will become externally focused. Drive, explode, throw. Focus on what you're doing to the bone, the outcome of the movement. What happens though when you reach a really high level of competence? And these cues, both internal and external, aren't really helping that much anymore, and we really need to keep pushing your performance along. It's here where we make another shift and move from these cues alone to incorporating and adding objective feedback and data on your performance. It's not enough anymore to just say push the ground away. We need to know how much power we're putting into the ground as we do that. Traditionally, the only objective feedback we had in the gym was weight, and the load on the bar, and how many reps we did. With VBT, we get a number of new objective data points and metrics to allow us to quantify performance in a range of dimensions. And athletes love this objective feedback. In sport, scoreboards, stats, and splits, these are how we measure success and progress towards that success. What's really cool about this objective feedback and monitoring of progress is there's really good research that we can bring this same objective scoring system into the gym as well. Real-time feedback in training, like velocity, power, these metrics we get from VBT, can increase training output and performance, as well as adaptation and transfer onto the sporting field or court. Let's look at a pair of studies from 2014 and 15 from Martin Keller. In this first study, they looked at jump performance across 3 different feedback settings. In the first group, they had internal feedback, so it was about extending your legs. That was the cue they were given. They improved their jump from baseline across the series by about 1%. Group 2, they got an external cue, so they told to reach their head up for a tennis ball that was above them on the jump mat. They increased their jump by about 1.4% across the group. But group 3, they got objective feedback on their performance. They saw their scores on a TV in real time as they were doing their jumping. And their improvement, they increased their jump by 4.1% within that session. So what's the takeaway from this? Just measure something. Jump height, sprint speed, bar velocity, power on your cleans, whatever it might be. Just measure something, give that data to your athletes, and have them start using that data to determine and start pushing more intent into their training, increasing the quality of every rep that they do. The next question that Keller and his team looked at was the idea of how often and what frequency of feedback you should be giving. So over a 6-week drop jump study, they looked at 0%, 50%, and then 100% feedback frequencies, and what effect that had on drop jump performance over the training period. And what they found was a pretty consistent linear increase in performance adaptation with more frequency of feedback. So the more often you got your feedback, the better you did at the end of this program. What that's showing is that athletes don't get numb to the effects of this feedback on their performance. In fact, they want more, to be continually gauging how well they're doing compared to their former efforts. So not only can objective feedback improve your performance within a training session or on a training exercise over time, but we can also see it improve the transfer and adaptation of your athletic qualities as well. This study from Aaron Randall is one of my absolute favourites when it comes to velocity-based training. Randall and his group, they took 13 professional rugby players and they looked at their performance in a field-based test. They looked at sprints and jumps from a 6-week strength and conditioning program. 3 times a week, doing the same programs with both groups, Group A and Group B. The only difference was Group B, the feedback group, they got feedback on one exercise. They did 40 kilo jump squats. Group A did them as well, they just didn't get the feedback. What we saw at the end of that 6 weeks is Group A, no feedback group, they improved. They got improvements in their speed and their jump, as you would expect with a standard strength and conditioning program. But they got absolutely obliterated by Group B, the group that did get velocity feedback on their jumps when it comes to their performance on the field. They had significantly higher improvements in speed and jump performance, all because they got feedback on their velocities for a single exercise, the 40 kilo jump squat. So what is it that makes feedback so effective at boosting performance in both the short and the long term? I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing a virtuous or a positive feedback cycle in athletes training. They do a rep or a set, they get some feedback, they try a little harder on the next set, and then they repeat that process. All these fun physiological things that improve strength and power, they're getting a boost by having that better intent, which is in turn driven by the feedback and that motivation to beat your former selves. We're benchmarking our training not just on how much weight you can lift, but how well you can lift those weights. Coaches and athletes can be a bit intimidated when it comes to starting to use velocity in their training. But I think that's what I love about this application. It's really simple and easy to just start measuring some stuff, but it's also really effective. You get great results out of this feedback piece. So here are 3 of my favorite really simple ideas that you can start using in the gym to start getting your athletes and maybe your coaching team familiar with these ideas around velocity. Number 1, just start measuring things. You don't have to have a grand plan or some master scheme that you're working towards. Just start linking your athletes' training to more than just the weight on the bar. So it might be bar speed, it might be power on things like Olympic lifts or jumps, it might be the height of things. It doesn't really matter. All we're doing here is getting familiar with the act of recording, and we're starting to link that idea of intent with velocity. So you get more out of every set, not just how much weight is on that last one. There's going to be some trial and error here, but the point is to engage your athletes with the concept and start getting familiar and comfortable with the idea of measuring velocity and what those velocity numbers might even be. Number 2, start setting some targets. It doesn't have to be velocity zones or linked to any specific physical qualities, but just start giving your athletes numbers and benchmarks to be working towards. Maybe you do 4x2 on your cleans, but a set only counts if an athlete hits 900 watts. These targets need to be realistic, but you can adjust them and adapt them on the fly. And number 3, try putting a leaderboard up in your gym so your athletes can compete not just against themselves, but also against their peers to create a nice motivating culture in your gym. You might change the tests or the exact metric you're measuring every few months, and it might not even be VBT, just something to get your athletes moving athletically and with high effort and intent every session. If you are using VBT metrics, I particularly like things that are scored relative to body weight. So it might be watts per kilo for a vertical jump, or peak power on a 75% of body weight power clean. These are good tests that create a reasonably level playing field so your athletes can compete not against themselves, but against each other as well. So high leverage strategies like the ones we've talked about so far are, I think, the best way to use velocity-based training in the gym, especially when you're just starting out. It's not too time consuming, you just record and review in real time, give your athletes the feedback, and enhance the training process. However, there is a next level we can take this feedback piece to, and that's the idea of including contextual historical data for your athletes. In the past, this has all been about weight. How much load was on the bar? Can I add a little bit more this week? Or can I do an extra rep in order to get stronger? But with velocity tracking, we can now measure progress in dozens of new ways. One of the simplest is just to compare your velocities, your movement velocity today compared to what you did last session. So for example, on your bench press, maybe you do 40, 60, 80 as your warm-up sets. Then today, you do that 40, 60, and 80 again to compare those velocities. Maybe you lifted all those same weights, but slightly faster, which shows you've got an increased rate of force development. As a result of that, maybe now you try and do a new PB of 90 kilos on your bench press, as an example, because that higher velocity on those warm-up sets suggests you're recovered or you've adapted since that last session. This is also a form of autoregulation as well as feedback and motivation. The next and slightly more advanced use of this contextual velocity feedback idea is to start comparing yourself to averages, not just single sessions. Because readiness changes a lot on a daily basis, by taking, say, a 30 or a 60-day average of your velocities, we start to get a more smooth general trend in your performance. What's nice about this too, is you'll now start beating that average score, maybe it's your 30-day average velocity, on a more consistent basis, making it a better motivational tool. We have a spreadsheet over on vbtcoach.com that you can download and use to get that 30-day average for your lifts to start tracking your own progress on that exact metric. One important note to clear up when it comes to this contextual velocity idea is it's really important that when you're comparing numbers, you are comparing accurately. So it has to be the same exercise. You can't compare your deadlift velocities to your squat velocities, for example, and you have to be using the same weight and roughly the same setup. So keep things consistent and compare them only to themselves for great contextual feedback. So let's come back to that question we posed at the very start of this video. What's a good velocity, or how fast should I be doing my movements? The answer is you should be trying to lift faster than a former version of yourself, trying to beat either last session or your average of, say, the last 30 or 60 days of lifting on that exercise. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here every session is shift that load velocity profile, either moving it up and lifting slightly faster on all the same weights, or moving out to the right and lifting heavier loads at the same velocity. Ideally, you'd do both. Along with a way of measuring progress, this is also a really good indicator of readiness and your sort of fatigue status. This data, this sort of 30-day average and your last session velocity data for your lifts, is really valuable context to help with autoregulation. This is a pretty advanced topic we're going to cover soon in an upcoming video, but I'd also like to hear your thoughts. What other topics, ideas and concepts in the world of velocity-based training would you like to see us cover in these videos? Hit me up in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.